Vitalik is in the Time magazine most influential list.
Vitalik Buterin has been called the world's youngest crypto billionaire.
He was never meant to be a king.
This guy named Vitalik Buterin.
I realized that there are so many different applications that you could possibly do on a blockchain.
He doesn't run a company.
I think one big one is just that a lot of people are underestimating smart contracts.
Vitalik Buterin and is their sort of visionary, and I think he's just early 20s now.
And look at that classic Vitalik photo. What a guy. Ethereum founder.
Vitalik Buterin is the blockchain movement's biggest celebrity.
He doesn't even own Ethereum.
Vitalik Buterin, Ethereum's co-founder.
The biggest risk of being friendly is if you end up attracting the terrible people.
And yet, when crypto markets crash,
The collapse of this Silicon Valley bank, is this going to cause a financial meltdown?
Meanwhile, Signature Bank marks the third largest bank failure in U.S. history.
There will be bank failures, but this is not the big banks.
The bank failures in the world's biggest economy send ripples of doubt across the markets.
when Ethereum forks, when billions are on the line, everyone turns to one man. Vitalik Buterin.
He created the Ethereum blockchain when he was just 21 years old, and its cryptocurrency, the Ether, is second only to Bitcoin.
A socially awkward genius.
The star child, he's a boy genius.
The question now is basically, can Bitcoin sort of catch up?
A philosophical idealist.
If you put people who hate each other distance one away from each other, and you have this, one big room with 100 million people shouting.
And, whether he likes it or not, the most powerful man in decentralized technology.
Potential of it is so massive.
I always like to hear his opinions. He's just like a fascinating person.
He built Ethereum to give power back to the people.
And what really struck out at me was this idea that it actually is still possible for people to come together and create an entire new financial system. And this seemed kind of very empowering to me.
What's going on right now?
There's definitely times when I want to be less visible.
But now, people are starting to ask, what happens when the most powerful person in crypto doesn't want power?
Making everyone happy was much more difficult than I expected.
And more importantly, should we be worried that he has it anyway? This is the story of Ethereum, of idealism, power, and unintended consequences.
The man behind Ethereum is worried about crypto's future.
The story of how a boy genius tried to rebuild the internet and what it cost him to try.
Vitalik has been on a global campaign.
Oh God, why are people listening to me? I'm just a guy.
Before Ethereum, before the headlines, there was just a quiet boy in Canada who didn't quite fit in. He was born in Russia, moved to Toronto as a child, but even among the smartest kids, he stood out. By grade 3, his teachers said he could multiply 3-digit numbers in his head. He could read and write complex computer code before he turned 10. Some thought he was a prodigy, others just thought he was weird. At one point, he said he saw the world in numbers, not just people and objects, but entire systems, patterns, possibilities. While most kids were playing video games, Vitalik Buterin was coding them from scratch. And then, at 17, he discovered Bitcoin.
At age 17, his father introduced him to Bitcoin.
And you started learning about Bitcoin from your father. What is it about Bitcoin that hooked you both?
Bitcoin is really interesting because of how interdisciplinary it is.
He didn't see it as just internet money. He saw potential, a decentralized revolution, but even Bitcoin to him was too limited. So he sat down alone and began writing what he called a more generalized version of Bitcoin.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage
Vitalik Buterin. He's the engineer recognized as the inventor of Ethereum.
The blockchain movement's biggest celebrity.
He's become something like the philosopher king of crypto.
Vitalik has been on a global campaign.
Ethereum has the potential to disrupt the giants of the tech world.
It could be used to build this new internet.
Not just a digital currency, but an entire network built on the blockchain.
The paper was just 5 pages long, but it would go on to spark a 400 billion ecosystem, and the man who wrote it was just 19 years old.
We know what decentralized networks are. I'm sure you've heard of BitTorrent and all the various file sharing networks, like all the various decentralized messaging systems. There was this group of cypherpunks that thought, okay, you can do all of those things in a decentralized way, but why can't we do decentralized cash?
One internet to rule them all. Ethereum wasn't built to replace banks. It was built to replace everything.
Ethereum was built to be a sort of new and improved version of Bitcoin and to do things that Bitcoin couldn't do.
Social media, banking, law, ownership, contracts, corporations, all of it rebuilt on top of one unstoppable platform. A decentralized internet run not by tech giants or governments, but by code.
Explain to me why this technology is so transformational that people think it'll change the world.
Because they represent kind of epochal changes in the options that we have for interacting with each other. With Bitcoin, it's you don't need banks to send money anymore. It's just something that happens directly peer-to-peer.
That's what made Ethereum different from Bitcoin. Bitcoin was digital gold, a store of value. But Ethereum was a world computer, a platform where anyone could build decentralized apps.
But that changes whole industries, doesn't it?
And it hasn't yet, but we'll see.
That couldn't be shut down, censored, or controlled. Imagine Twitter, but no CEO. A financial system without a central bank. Contracts that execute themselves. Organizations run entirely by their communities. That's what Vitalik envisioned.
This is an important set of upgrades that fundamentally improves what Ethereum can do.
People seeking a deeper kind of democracy in this digital space.
And in 2015, Ethereum went live.
The original reason why I like the name is that Ether is this sort of thing that, scientists were hypothesizing about in the 19th century, where people were thinking,
no VCs, no IPO, just an idea, a white paper, and a group of developers who believed.
At the end of the day, it's this kind of fabric for what you could almost describe as being a kind of new internet infrastructure.
Eventually run a Facebook-like application. The difference is that it would be peer-to-peer, decentralized rather than a client-server type architecture.
And by 2017, that idea had become a movement.
The big news coming in that these ETFs based on the price of Ether have been approved.
Spot Ethereum ETF set to begin trading today. It's a completely different game now.
Blockchain, which some are comparing to the early days of the internet. It sounds confusing, but listen up.
It introduces so many opportunities, so many unique business models.
People say blockchain could end companies as we know them.
For regulators, it is certainly a concern. You have things like the SEC, you have FinCEN, you have the IRS.
But while the business world scrambles to exploit it, and governments rush to regulate it, countries like Russia see a very different opportunity.
If blockchains are as transformative as the proponents are saying they are, then that would imply that eventually we'll see hundreds of millions of people using it in some way or another.
Ethereum wasn't just surviving, it was eating the internet.
It's not just a piece of code that's there for fun. It's not even just an app. It's something that's really intended to have a very big and meaningful impact on how the world works.
Until one day, it nearly died. Not because of government regulation, not because of a competitor, but because of a single hack.
Crypto platform reports a hacker stole nearly £1.2 billion worth of cryptocurrency.
A single hack that exposed a fatal flaw. A flaw not just in the code, but in the very idea of decentralization itself. Ethereum had already surpassed Bitcoin. It was the blockchain. But on June 17th, 2016, the dream nearly came crashing down. A new project on Ethereum, the DAO, had raised over $150 million, and then it was hacked.
About 2 hours ago, Bybit experienced a hack around 401,000 Ethereum. As far as we know, this could be the largest hack in the history of our industry.
In the blink of an eye, the hacker drained a third of the DAO's funds, $60 million, gone. Ethereum's reputation shattered. This wasn't just a bug, it wasn't a mistake, it was a fundamental flaw in the trustless system that Ethereum had built its name on.
In what could be the largest theft of its kind, the Dubai-based cryptocurrency exchange Bybit says that someone gained control of an Ethereum digital wallet.
Vitalik and his team didn't know what to do. If they did nothing, the hacker would get away with it. But if they intervened, they would violate the very principle of decentralization they had championed. Should they fix the code and give back the stolen funds, or let the system play out, trusting that the code was law? The choice was clear. Ethereum had to fork. So they split the blockchain in two. The old Ethereum, which kept the hackers' stolen funds, and the new Ethereum, which erased the theft. And just like that, Ethereum was divided. The ethics of decentralization were now uncertain. Ethereum was still alive, but its purity, that was gone. Ethereum survived the DAO hack, but the damage was more than just financial. In the aftermath, Vitalik and his team made a decision. They chose to intervene, a centralized decision, in a decentralized world. And that decision left a scar on Ethereum's soul.
So what that means is that it's still a centralized exchange, but it uses smart contracts in some way, possibly Plasma or something similar, to have the property that even if the exchange gets hacked or the exchange becomes malicious, you can still get your money out.
The truth is, even in a decentralized ecosystem, there are still power players. The core devs, Vitalik himself, the exchanges, the miners, the whales, all of them still have influence. And as Ethereum grew, that influence became harder to ignore. Ethereum wasn't just about the technology anymore. It was about the people behind the technology, the power of those people. And that power, it was growing every day.
Ethereum's crypto platform, right? People are building other things on that platform, and that's the principal appeal, smart contracts and the fact that you can build something.
If Ethereum was going to be the future, it needed to ask itself, who really controls Ethereum, and who really controls the future of decentralization?
So who actually controls the Ethereum network?
Vitalik Buterin has come out and said that he hasn't sold any ETH for personal gain since 2018.
Actually, I think there has been a huge amount of progress in decentralizing Ethereum already.
Ethereum was supposed to be decentralized.
Decentralized database. It's this database that anyone can add things to, but you can't remove anything from.
But if you dig deeper, things get murky. In theory, Ethereum is governed by the community, developers, node operators, validators. But in practice, a small group of developers push through upgrades. Validators with the most ETH hold the most sway. And key infrastructure, like Infura and MetaMask, are operated by centralized companies. That's not just influence, that's power. When Ethereum transitioned to proof of stake, many celebrated. It was green, energy efficient, the future. But critics pointed out something else.
I like proof of stake, and I've liked proof of stake for many years, basically because it's just much less resource intensive. And this is good for a few reasons.
The top staking entities, Lido, Coinbase, Binance, began to dominate the network. As of 2024, over 50% of staked ETH is controlled by a few centralized actors, and in the middle of it all is Vitalik Buterin.
Absolutely have long periods between decision and implementation, just because there's so many applications. But of course that's, but then obviously there's issues on the other side, right? Which are that it's if we want to consider a change that will reduce its impact to a couple of important applications, and if the same transaction edge case does it, then that's to me that's absolutely worth thinking about.
As Ethereum grew, it became more and more apparent that decentralization was harder to achieve than originally imagined. Vitalik was always the face of this vision, but he was more than just a figurehead. He wasn't just the visionary behind Ethereum, he was the very force driving it forward. And therein lies the paradox.
To create these kind of decentralized networks with memory, so these kind of decentralized database-like things, for a whole bunch of other applications as well, right? So around 2013, people started realizing really that these blockchains are usable for much more than peer-to-peer digital currency.
How can true decentralization ever take root when the very man who created the network is still its most powerful figure? In a system built to eliminate central power, How can Ethereum ever achieve real decentralization when the creator remains the dominant voice in the room? The reality is simple. Vitalik's presence at the center of Ethereum means decentralization is still incomplete. Vitalik's influence isn't just strong, it's all-encompassing. On the one hand, his vision is the driving force behind Ethereum's progress, but on the other, his leadership could be the thing holding Ethereum back from reaching its true potential. Can Ethereum survive without Vitalik?
What would happen if the co-founder of the world's second largest cryptocurrency were to step away altogether from the project? Would it bring down Ethereum altogether?
The truth is, no one really knows. Vitalik may have created Ethereum's foundation, but can it truly flourish when the central figure is also the single point of control? This is the paradox Vitalik himself faces every day. He's fighting for decentralization, but he is the very thing that keeps it from being fully realized.
The MEV ecosystem is not the only thing threatening staking decentralization.
But for Ethereum, the paradox of power wasn't just philosophical, it was existential. Because while the world was watching Vitalik, Ethereum was being outpaced. New technologies were rising fast, transaction fees were spiraling, scalability was a crisis. Ethereum wasn't just fighting to stay true to its ideals, it was fighting to survive. And that fight began with Ethereum 2.0.
Ethereum might not survive in the next 10 years.
So if you always have the asset on Ethereum, it means that it's secure on Ethereum, but then you can mirror over that token onto another blockchain like Solana, I'd say would be a good example, or EOS or whatever.
If Vitalik is the paradox, Ethereum 2.0 is his attempt to solve it.
Ethereum 2 is this big, sprawling effort to mainly make 2 upgrades to Ethereum.
A decentralized system should not depend on one man, and so Vitalik did what few founders ever do. He tried to make himself obsolete. Ethereum needed to grow faster, stronger, more sustainable, but also more independent. Vitalik understood, if Ethereum was going to truly decentralize and live up to its promise, it couldn't be tethered to him, so he began rewriting the very core of the system. Ethereum 1.0 had run on proof of work, the same system Bitcoin uses, but it was slow, energy hungry, expensive, and Ethereum needed more than just an upgrade. That's when Ethereum 2.0 was born. Ethereum 2.0 introduced proof of stake.
One of them is switching the consensus from proof of work to proof of stake, which we believe to be much more energy efficient, much less tree killing.
A shift so radical, it changed everything. No more miners competing to solve complex puzzles. Now, anyone with ETH could secure the network simply by staking their tokens. It was faster, more scalable, and crucially, more energy efficient. It was the solution to Ethereum's biggest bottleneck, scalability. But that wasn't the only change. Ethereum 2.0 also introduced sharding, splitting the blockchain into smaller pieces that could run in parallel. This allowed for more transactions to happen simultaneously, scaling Ethereum without breaking the system.
Solana also combines proof of stake with a really innovative practice called proof of history. Now, proof of history is just an idea where every transaction is stamped with a timestamp. So it makes it really easy to come to consensus a lot faster, which makes Solana faster and more cheap.
While Ethereum was reshaping itself, though, a new breed of blockchains had already entered the race. Solana had introduced proof of history, allowing it to process thousands of transactions per second, far faster than Ethereum's proof of work could handle. And Avalanche, with its Avalanche consensus model, was boasting lightning-fast finality and rock-bottom transaction fees. These new blockchains weren't just upgrades. They were entire ecosystems built from the ground up for speed, scalability, and efficiency. Ethereum couldn't keep up with these newcomers, not yet, but it still had one powerful advantage, the network effect.
Building network effects for a lot of crypto applications that would otherwise not find a network effect on their own is one of them, and I think finding network effects for DAC applications
And like at the same time as it even like synergistically with being intellectual salons for DEC and for Ethereum, I think is definitely one of them.
Ethereum had the largest, most established ecosystem in crypto. Developers, users, and infrastructure that no one else could rival. That network effect gave Ethereum an edge. But was it enough?
Like originally we envisioned something more like a big grand event where, you know, all the good things would happen at the same time, and it would be a new blockchain, and it would be a new protocol, and people would have to take a lot of effort to migrate over. But later we've slowly changed the roadmap over to something that's much more incremental.
Here's the truth. Ethereum had to evolve. It had no choice. Ethereum 2.0 wasn't just a technological upgrade. It was Ethereum's fight for survival. Vitalik's gamble was more than just a new version of the network. It was his last-ditch effort to hand over control to the community, to decentralize Ethereum once and for all. Vitalik Buterin didn't just build Ethereum to make money. He built it to change the world. When Vitalik first pitched the idea of Ethereum, it seemed like a pipe dream. Blockchain technology was still in its infancy, with Bitcoin as the only real example. But Vitalik saw something others didn't. He saw smart contracts. He saw programmable money. He saw a world where anyone, anywhere, could participate in building the future.
I came up with the idea behind Ethereum, this idea of a blockchain with a built-in programming language, as kind of what I thought was the simplest and kind of most logical way to actually build a platform that can be used for many more kinds of applications.
Ethereum's success wasn't just about technology, it was about vision. Vitalik's ability to see beyond the present, to imagine a world where decentralized apps, decentralized finance, and decentralized governance weren't just possible, but inevitable. But his legacy is more than just what he built. It's the ethos he instilled into the community. Decentralization isn't just a tech concept, it's a philosophy. Vitalik believed that true freedom lies in the ability for individuals to control their own data, their own wealth, and their own destiny. His work opened the door for countless innovations, from decentralized finance, DeFi, to NFTs, DAOs, and more. Vitalik's impact is felt in every corner of the crypto ecosystem. He didn't just create a blockchain, he created a platform for the future. But with that vision comes a responsibility. The responsibility to guide Ethereum into a future where it's not just about him, but about the community and the vision he sparked. Vitalik is still at the helm, but the true legacy of Ethereum will be how it evolves beyond him, a decentralized world built by many.
Great, so this is the one of the sort of standard presentations I give when people want just like a quick overview of the entire Ethereum protocol. So chances are you'll listen through this, you'll catch some things, you won't catch other things, but at the very least you'll kind of understand what the broad structure is, and if there's any particular piece that you don't fully understand.
Vitalik's story isn't just about what Ethereum has become. It's about the legacy he's leaving for the next generation of blockchain innovators. A legacy that will outlive him and continue to shape the decentralized future for years to come.
The first part is there's this idea of Bitcoin, the decentralized currency. It's a form of money that exists purely online, and you could transfer it from anyone to anyone around the world instantly with pretty much no fees. You can transfer money from Kyrgyzstan to Guatemala just as easily, just as quickly, and just as cheaply as you can to your own neighbor.
Ethereum's journey is far from over. The transition to Ethereum 2.0 was just the beginning. The world is watching, and so is the future. With Ethereum 2.0 in place, Ethereum has become more scalable, secure, and energy efficient. But the road ahead is still filled with challenges. The network must prove it can scale even further. The competition from other blockchain technologies is fierce. Solana, Avalanche, and even newer projects are pushing the limits of what blockchain can do. Ethereum's grip on the market isn't guaranteed. Yet, despite these challenges, Ethereum's impact on the world is undeniable. It's powered the rise of DeFi, NFTs, and DAOs, shifting the balance of power from centralized institutions to individuals. Ethereum has ignited a global movement, one that's still evolving, and Vitalik's dream of a decentralized internet is more within reach than ever. But whether Ethereum can maintain its dominance or whether other competitors will rise to take its place is something only time will tell. One thing is for certain, Ethereum isn't just changing the future of money, it's changing the future of the internet itself. Now, if you're ready to capitalize on Ethereum's evolution and blockchain's future, we've got something special brewing, something that could potentially change the way you make money in this space, but we're keeping it under wraps for now. If you want to be one of the first to know and start making moves before anyone else, click the link below to register your email. Don't miss out, this is the chance you've been waiting for.